Hello, everyone. It is June 16th. This is the Velero community meeting. Jonas is off on vacation this week, so I will be emceeing. I'll drop the meeting notes in chat there, and I will share my screen. And just a quick programming note. We have an archive of the older meeting notes. Actually got about a year's worth of notes in, and then we maxed out on the length of the HackMD. So we moved all the old notes into an archive note or an archive at HackMD, and now we are starting fresh. So we've got a new note here, and with that, I think we will get into status updates. So first up is Steve.
Yeah, hey everyone. Last week I was on community support, which kept me pretty busy and plenty of PR reviews. The main thing I wanted to cover is I wanted to let the community know that I'm going to be transitioning off of the Velero project and onto a different role at VMware fairly shortly. And Nolan will be taking over as the tech lead from the VMware side. So I just wanted to say, a big thank you to the community. It's been, for me, a really incredible experience being part of this project and watching the community grow around it. It's been really rewarding for me. So definitely a big thank you to you all. Really kind of proud of what we've been able to build together, and I'll certainly miss the project, but I think there are great things ahead for it. So I'm excited to see where it goes. I'm happy to answer any questions if anyone has any.
Yeah, thanks for all you've done, Steve. And for those of you who don't know, Steve has been basically, I think Steve was basically the first person on Velero. Velero started at Heptio as EBS Snapshotter before it was even Arc. So Steve, thank you for everything you've done on the project. Everyone who uses it owes you a lot, and good luck in your future endeavors. And yeah, I look forward to working with everybody on this project going forward. And yeah, Steve's not going far, and he'll be around for a little bit longer. But I will be taking over kind of GitHub maintenance stuff, making sure PRs don't fall through the cracks. And if you have any questions, please let me know. So, yeah, and for my update, last week I was mostly focused on some internal build tooling around Velero still. I know I said this last week, but I intend to catch up on community reviews. I know those PRs are stacking up. So it is a priority to start whittling those down. I know there's some big design documents that are getting pretty close to getting merged. So hopefully we can get those in this week. And yeah, those are my two big things to mention. And if no one has any questions, I think we can move to Ashish.
For me, I was working on like the internal build stuff for the plugins last week. This week I'm taking a break from that to finish up on a pending PR that I have open. And I'm on community support this week, so I will also be doing some PR reviews and reviewing your design docs. So that's all I have on my plate.
Okay, Carlisia?
All right, so I am behind on PR reviews. I need to jump on there. We have a lot of open PRs.
Hey, Carlisia, you're sounding a little bit muffled. I don't know if it's for everybody.
Is it better now? Sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, sorry.
Put that expensive microphone to use.
I have a knob, and if I leave it on, I get a feedback thing, and then I have to reboot my computer. So anyway, I am behind on PR reviews. I need to jump on there. We have quite a few open PRs, lots of contributions there. And I am simultaneously, so last week I spent time working on the adding the attack. So I spent time adding the BSL controller, the backup storage location controller, using the controller runtime package in KubeBuilder. And I pushed the PR that's in draft. And then I added the initial test setup. It took me a while to make it work. Had to dig for examples of how people did it out there that would fit with what we are doing. I haven't pushed that, but that is working, so it's looking promising. I just have to now actually test the controller. And then my first PR, which is to actually add the KubeBuilder controller runtime things, and also convert the BSL resource to use those packages. It's pretty much almost done, but now we're having a problem. I think it's a race condition, and Andy took an interest in maybe helping me, but I talked to him this morning, and then I think he got busy. I pushed a commit that's actually breaking the test, but the code would run. So he could check it out. What's happening is when the server starts, the backup sync controller kicks in, like it's one of the first things that starts calling the BSL resource to see what backups are available and what backups needs to be synced. But at that point, the cache is not completely populated. If we didn't do the validation and just left it running, it will quickly stop erroring out because the cache will be populated. But we do need to get rid of that error, and the way to do it is having it populated before the sync controller runs, and that's the order of things that I'm having trouble making that work, and hopefully Andy will help me with that. That's it.
Okay. Any questions? Okay. If not, I think we could move on to discussion topics. My first one actually I put on, but I think this is largely for Dave, who's on the call. Ashish had actually opened this issue for CSI. And I think Dave has a similar use case in which he's creating custom resources with item action plugins and needs to clean them up. Dave, do you want to talk about your use case? And
yeah, so one use case actually will boil down to being the CSI use case in the long term. But I think the other thing is that we are going to have other objects other than PVCs and PVs and volumes that we're snapshotting and backing up at some point. So with our Project Pacific work, which is the vSphere with Kubernetes, there's some restrictions in the supervisor, what we call the supervisor cluster. One of those restrictions is we can't just directly statically provision volumes the way that we used to. So we had to have a couple choices here inside Velero. One is to make a provisioning plugin so that we could call out to this special provisioning code, because I don't think we want a big if then else statement in the middle of Velero. And the other option that we've been looking at is to just move our plugin up a couple levels so that it's no longer a volume snapshotter, but it starts actually working at the PVC level, the same way the CSI driver does. And there's other objects that are coming down the pipe that we'll want to be taking as objects that actually can be snapshotted. For example, operator-driven databases. So the CSI plugin, as it's currently implemented, is a backup item action and restore item action. I think that's the correct nomenclature. But what it doesn't have is it doesn't have a delete snapshot on that path. So I think we need to figure out a way to get snapshot deletion for objects other than volumes working. And I guess the CSI plugin, I'm not sure exactly how the CSI plugin hooks the deletion together.
So, go ahead, Ashish. I see you unmuted.
I was going to say that is hooked up into the backup deletion controller, which is run on backup expiry or backup deletion. So that's how we handle the deletion for the CSI.
Does that actually call into the plugin?
No, it's in the Velero core code base. So,
Right.
so Ashish originally opened this issue to implement deletion. Well, go ahead, Ashish. I won't speak for you.
Oh no, I didn't want to update core Velero for deletion of CRDs created during backup because it would mean baking in things that don't really belong into Velero core. So that's when I had this idea of maybe we should have a backup deletion plugin, which is letting people run custom deletion logic or custom cleanup logic to delete CRDs. Deletion of CRDs is not just the only scenario. There may be other cleanup that other scenarios may require. So I wanted to have a plugin to do that. And this issue was surfacing that problem for us to make a proposal and fix at a later point.
Yeah, so I think that would solve my issues. I think longer term, we'd want to also look at maybe having an object snapshotter plugin, but that doesn't need, I think we can, that probably actually needs some thought and design.
Yeah, and from my perspective, the reason I thought at the time, the reason I thought that this wasn't necessary for CSI is because I think CSI long-term will become core enough to Kubernetes that it can justify. I think it can arguably be integrated into core Velero, but as we see other needs, I can see that there's needs to model things with these item action plugins, and then you need to clean them up, but we have no way of getting into that lifecycle. So I also made this comment last Thursday. They're like in this instance, there's people who want to do a very similar approach, but they have no way of cleaning it up without modifying core Velero. The other reasoning was we have a lot of core Velero logic that's implemented as plugins. So there's no reason we couldn't say, just do the CSI cleanup as a deletion plugin. The third piece was kind of similar to that, that it would allow us to make the deletion controller smaller, so that it would really just manage the backup custom resource, and then it might invoke individual deletion plugins, and that may make the move to Cube Builder and controller runtime easier. I don't know. That's conjecture. And I've also another idea was possibly making one of these deletion plugins that had a config map that listed custom resource definitions that said, okay, just list a bunch of CRDs. So volume snapshots, volume snapshot contents. I think the CNS thing is CNS register volume. I think that's what it's called. But define a bunch of CRDs and then have this deletion plugin just go delete CRDs that are labeled with the backup name. So we just make one. The user could define a list of CRDs that would need to go get deleted, and then we don't have to define individual plugins for CRDs. But these are ideas to toss out there, and I guess I'm asking generally for the community if this makes sense. I think it makes sense for Velero architecturally and probably for VMware. So I'm curious. I think Vishnu, you had commented, I think for OpenEBS, the volume snapshotter makes sense. So this probably is a little orthogonal. Like it doesn't really matter there, but I'm curious about other people's thoughts.
I think the config map approach is simple enough for us to implement, but the only downside there is we are only handling deletion of CRDs. Any other sort of custom cleanup logic that may appear in like a future use case, we might not handle that.
Well, to clarify, I would say that this would be one plugin it would be one deletion type plugin type that takes a config map. So we would implement the plugin architecture generally, and then we would bundle a plugin that knew how to delete CRDs instead of implementing one plugin per CRD, just as like a quality of life convenience measure.
Yep.
That was my thinking.
Yeah, I think that's a good starting point, and we can start with that. And as needs arise, we can improvise on that.
Yeah, and then folks who have non-Kubernetes resources, so if they need to go clean up something in their storage system or in a cloud provider or somewhere else outside of Kubernetes, they have that hook.
This is Vishnu. The config map concept with the CRDs in it for cleanup really makes sense for at least Kubernetes-based applications who have the CRs usually. So the custom logic can go into the controller of the CRs as a delete event. I mean, the code can be written to other cleanups. But yeah, as non-Kubernetes versions, as you said, like this can act as an example to extend themselves. Yeah. This for sure helpful. This config map CRDs can be little thought of, like not only for delete config map kind of thing, but even for let's say for even syncing up to the object store, and then again back into the object store and syncing back during this and the restore process. I mean, not even restore. The backup sync controller can think of syncing to the clusters. That sounds good. Yeah.
Hey guys, this is Alay from the Red Hat camp. I'm sorry, I don't have a lot of understanding in the problem we are solving, but has anyone looked at slapping like owner references on the fly to the resources created by the plugin, so that when the backup gets deleted, we get that automatically garbage collected by Kube system itself?
So in at least some of our cases, so like the plugin that we're building is really talking to something that's outside Kubernetes to store the snapshots. So the same way the volume snapshotter is talking directly to EBS, and the snapshot isn't actually represented inside of Kubernetes. So I think having this explicit delete action is useful. And we can also do things like not just necessarily clean up CRs, but also do any other kind of cleanup logic that might have to happen there.
And another scenario where the ownership references wouldn't work is cluster migration. When your cluster is nuked, if you delete all CRs or CRDs that are there, you will not be able to restore, and all your references in your backup object store will all be dangling.
Sure. I'm sorry, I don't follow that last part of how we get dangling owner references, but the custom inability of running custom logic with the owner references makes sense. So thanks.
Yeah, so if you have a backup, right, the backup has, the current Velero backup has a list of snapshot IDs in it. And if you say to Velero, delete this backup, Velero goes and pulls the backup, or it already pulled the backup, but it has all the snapshot IDs that need to be deleted. Those are not necessarily surfaced into Kubernetes. So even with CSI snapshots, like if we recreate it, or if we've deleted the cluster and then you start using the repository someplace else, the CSI snapshots don't automatically surface as CRDs.
Sure, that makes sense. Thanks.
Actually, that does kind of beg the question: if we're deleting a backup, does that mean we have to statically provision each CRD, each CSI snapshot, and then delete it?
That's what we do, right, Ashish?
When we delete the backup?
So when we sync for CSI, we pull in each volume snapshot content object. So when CSI support is enabled, we actually pull in the volume snapshot content so that we have a pointer to the actual snapshot, so that when we delete, we can clean it up. We go change the deletion policy so that Velero doesn't fill up your storage. So yeah, we do some of that on the CSI side. We do some of that accounting.
Yeah, we want the snapshots or the backup to persist accidental deletions, but we want to clean up when somebody really wants to clean up. So
yeah, and to clarify, this is for when Velero is doing garbage collection and when somebody explicitly says Velero backup delete. So if you do kubectl backup delete, or I forget the order of commands in kubectl, but if you delete the backup with kubectl, this would not necessarily get invoked, because if you did the owner references, they would get deleted, but this plugin would not get invoked because it's out of order. If we did it as webhooks, we might be able to get it, but that's currently not in the Velero design. We would have to revisit how we do stuff. But I'm not hearing any major objections to doing this. So I think we'll have to talk, like Stephanie will have to talk about timelines for when this is necessary. But I think this is mostly an addition and won't be a breaking change to Velero.
One thing I would add to this is that, consider using metadata instead of a config map. Like if you label these things, then you can also just filter on labels, and you're not tied to the fact that now you have something that you have to maintain sync on. If somebody edits the config map, or if it gets modified, a label match wouldn't actually cost you as much. The other one that is interesting is that in CRDs, you can specify that CRDs are part of a group, so that you can do a kubectl get group name, and you would get all of the resources defined within that group. Cluster API implemented this, and it's actually pretty neat. If you do kubectl get cluster API, you get the result of effectively like a kubectl get all, but specific to cluster API. And so you would see machines, you would see clusters, you'd see QVM control planes, those sorts of things, just in that one output, which I think gets you pretty close to where you're trying to get.
That's a good point. I think the difference here would be that we would want anyone to register. So in, I think Dave's case, we're trying to register stuff that's outside of Velero. It's part of the CN, like the VMware CNS stuff, and it would be in a separate group from Velero.io. So
yeah.
So we wouldn't be able to retroactively like group them.
That makes sense.
So we kind of want anybody to jump in and participate.
Yeah, it'd be kind of interesting to like see the community group on like backup as a group or something like that.
Right. If we could make a virtual group, that would be cool. That's kind of why I suggested a config map. But if we could make a label that said like delete, like if we could label the CRD or something, that may be better than a config map. So
yeah,
that's a good point.
You can expand the label selector to say get all resources with this label and delete them. I don't know if we are being too aggressive with such a delete, but
we could move that to a design discussion. But I think this was more of a see if there's any early objections, but this would be totally optional. Nobody has to participate in it. And we could move some of the Velero internals around to use it, but that's a good point, Duffy. I think that would be useful. At the very least, if we could do a specific label, that might be better than a config map that we would have to sync around and have people edit.
Well, we're going to have two things, right? I mean, so the plugin API itself is going to say, hey, here's this object that I need you to clean up. Right. And then plugins could be based on different things.
Right. We could make a plugin that did the label select, or people could make their own plugin that does whatever, right? You could bundle it. You could make your own bundle of plugins that includes a deletion plugin that does who knows what.
Yeah, and I would say that we probably want to keep it very targeted so that Velero is explicitly saying, delete this snapshot, not delete all the snapshots that happen to have a label X. At least from the API point of view, because that's scary.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm more looking at like how we aggregate the snapshots outside of having to maintain a list.
Sure.
If there's a way to leverage metadata to create that list or to understand that list, that is probably a better implementation than trying to actually use a config map as a list object.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree. Like delete all is something that we'll always remember. Like.
Yep. Velero tends to the design has tended to be not to delete stuff, but yeah, even our current snapshot delete stuff is pretty targeted. So, and my thinking with the config map was all instances of this CRD with the Velero backup name equals this specific backup name that's being deleted. So it wasn't all CRDs, it was these things. But I think for now we can table this one and move on to other topics. And I moved this one up just so I wasn't jumping in the middle. I'm going to make this one real quick. The restore hooks design is very close. The last thing we had last week was a discussion on init containers versus how it's currently working. And really, I just want to ask that the maintainers take another pass on this. And that's all I had. And then I was going to pass it off to Duffy. You wanted to talk about linters for Velero.
Yeah, it's basically an update on some of the things we've been working on. Let me share my screen here. Hold on 1 second. Technical difficulties. Hold on 1 second. Okay, share. All right, so we've been working on a few things. This is the HackMD that is tracking this stuff, and it's linked in the associated PRs. There are 3 PRs open right now that we're working on. The first one is the first and simplest is the updating Jekyll to 4.1.0, and that one's, I think, in a pretty good state. So probably want to get that one reviewed and maybe merged in. But this is basically just updating the packages and moving to 4.1.0. Looks like the builds are about 3 times faster, which is pretty awesome. The second PR is image handling, and the first part of this is basically just decoupling the building of the image from picking the image in the make file. And the way that that works is that you would have in your make file, instead of make shell using make image as a dependency, it would use make build end as a dependency. And what that does is it actually has some logic built into it to determine one of 3 things. If we already have a cached local image that is in line with the content of the Docker file in this local checkout, then we'll just use that cached image. If there is a change in that Docker file that hasn't been committed, then we'll build a new image based on that Docker file, the image builder Docker file. And the third one is escapes me at the moment, but it's all in the commit, so it might be good to get some feedback on that, see if that makes sense for folks. But it basically really shortens the time to being able to iterate using the containerized build environment. The third one is the linter, and the linter I think is probably the more interesting change for everybody. First thing I wanted to point out was that the linter is completely configurable via a configuration file, which would be hosted in the root of the Velero directory. It's called golengci.yaml, and it has the ability to configure each of the linters pretty extensively, right? And so by default, we're not going to turn all of the linters on, but we have the ability to turn on things like GoSec and a number of other linters that are supported by this upstream project. golengci lint is an upstream project that is like a lot of folks are using to do linting for their Golang projects, and it actually has a pretty good output for like a ton of different plugins. A demonstration of that one real quick. We do. There are 2 targets that we initially started with. One is make lint, which is a containerized version of the linter, and then there's also make local lint, which implies that you have golengci lint command line locally, and you'll just be able to use that same configuration and everything locally. By default, we run these linters and we output that to the output, so you can see what linters are run against the repository. Go sec, go const, go format, go import, unparam. Some of these are duplicates. And so if we think about like make verify work, what make verify does right now, we're kind of redoing some of that with this output. And then we've also implemented a linters argument. So you could have it so that it will run only a particular linter, which is great if you're like iterating on like specific changes, or if you wanted to like even try to do the auto fix, like some of these linters have an auto fix capability, like go imports and that sort of stuff. This would give you the ability to say target just that one linter and then pass the fix argument into it. That's where we're at on those 3 things. And so yeah, I think it's probably be good to get some time to like to review what we've got so far and see if we're on the right track, or if there's any like outstanding feedback on those 3 PRs.
Hey, Duffie,
Mm-hmm.
Is there any way to integrate that linter, the linter and the specific rules we're going to use with IDEs?
With IDs? What do you mean?
Just
with
what I mean
IDEs.
is,
Sorry, yes.
yeah, configure my ID to. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
golengci definitely has like the project itself has a ton of implementations for different IDEs. I think they have a VS Code one. If there's like a Vim plugin for it, but basically it's just a Go binary that like provides you a way to configure like all of the linters that are supported by that guy. And so, yeah, you could totally integrate it locally.
Cool. I'll search for that.
That is awesome, Duffie and team. The build image thing is something that's been in my personal mental to-do list for a long time, because it always bugged me that our process would build the image over and over. So yeah, and I think your next steps were like getting this all running locally and then moving it into CI, or getting it all running locally for the linters. We can start fixing some stuff and ignoring some stuff if we deem it ignorable, and then getting it into CI.
Exactly. Yeah. The next part of this is going to be basically taking the linter output and then opening issues based on it, and like taking a hack at like getting some of the low hanging fruit smashed down, and then if we and then figuring out like what the right configuration is for to like ignore generated files and that sort of stuff within the project. But I don't. Once we actually get that, in a pretty good steady state, then we can talk about moving it into CI and how that mechanism would work. But I think that yeah, at the moment it's I don't think it's ready, nearly ready for CI. It's just ready for people to play with it.
Sure.
And then the other one on the image handling, I do have another piece to this, which I'd like to see happen. And this is actually a request by Steve Chris, who is the who requested that, like, is there a way for us to actually cache the build image like in a registry, like in the Velero registry, and that way if we see that there's no changes to the Docker file, then we could just use the one that's there. And so I've been starting down the design path on that. And what I've been thinking about doing is actually having it so that on a master build, we build a tagged version of the Velero builder image based on a checksum of the Docker file. And if we see that the checksum of the Docker file matches one that we have an existing tag for, then we just pull it. And if we don't, then we build it. And if there's a outstanding change to the local Docker file, then we build it. And that, I think, would catch most of those cases. And that way, if you were on an earlier branch, like at an earlier tag or a release or whatever, then we would likely already have a cache for that builder image that built that particular release. And if not, then we would know how to build it from the local Docker file. So it's kind of backwards compatible by default.
Yeah, I think that would save a ton of time on our PR builds too. Yeah, that's that part for me is huge.
I'll follow up for some review this week then. Awesome, thanks.
Cool, thank you. Any other comments?
I just made a comment on the linter PR. I think we can enable it for CI so that no new linter errors are added as part of PRs, and we can ignore the existing ones. And if folks feel inclined, they may opportunistically fix some small linter errors.
That's a great point. Yeah, they do have a flag for like -n or whatever, which will only show, and it's actually kind of smart. It'll only show things that the linter caught between the current commit and the one previous, which is wild. So it'll only show like things that you introduced in this commit.
It's like a diff, or it's based on the diff.
Yeah, pretty slick.
That'd be awesome.
Maybe I'll make that a separate PR. Well, I guess pushing that in as part of this initial commit would make more sense. Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Thanks.
Awesome. All right. Next up, we have Vishnu. So we're talking about the progress on backup and restore operations, which I think is pretty close, and also Restic snapshot differential size.
Yes, Nolan. And just before starting my discussion, I would like to thank to Steve for starting the Velero and being part of it and building the community. And the recent interaction I had with him, really, I learned a lot from him about Velero and the design of it and things. Thanks, Steve, for all the help.
Thanks, Vishnu. I appreciate that.
Coming to my discussion on the Restic snapshot, the first one, it's about currently Restic stores or the pod volume backup shows the total bytes and the bytes to backup, which tells like what is the volume size if I restore this particular backup, right? But the point is, I want to ask here is like, is there way or need to know only the differential size from the previous snapshot? That helps, like if I delete the snapshot, how much of the space actually gets reclaimed from my backup location, the object storage. So that's what will help, like for anyone to know what backup to delete, or like, so basically which backup is the one taking a lot of space on the object location. That kind of information will be helpful. Any thoughts on how to do that, or would be helpful?
So for starters, all Velero backups are like independent and they are full backups, right? So they are not incremental. So I'm not sure what you mean by which backup to delete.
I think this is in Restic, right? So Restic snapshots are definitely have a chain. If you use Restic, those would be incremental. Even if the Velero snapshot, or even if the Kubernetes metadata is full, the Restic snapshots associated with it may have been incrementals.
That's true. Actually, yeah. All the blogs, everything says that all the Restic snapshots are full, but the point is they won't send the full data. They have a deduplication of the block happens. So it's a kind of internally, we can say like, so it maintains a tree structure to go to a particular backup, the file system tree structure it maintains. So the point is, if you delete a particular backup, I mean, I have 10 backups of Restic, I can go and delete the 6th backup. So, but doesn't mean that I have basically, let's say I have 1 gig of each storage, I mean, the volume size, and I don't mean really using 10 gig. I'll be using only probably only the different blocks is kind of blocks. So it actually takes care of that. So there's also a command, if I'm not wrong, for Restic, and if it pass couple of snapshots, it gives you the difference between them. So that's what I'm actually looking at, and probably I can, if that makes sense, I can we can contribute back to Velero, basically add a new field to progress, or pod volume backup. One more field we can add, which tells the differential, the size from the previous snapshot. I need to explore more, but I just want to see if any info we have on that from the community.
Well, are you planning to store that in the Velero backup? Because that may not be static. That may change depending on what other snapshots exist.
Got it. So basically, it's the amount of the changes which happens, it can change. I mean, as the changes happen, they can modify it.
Yeah, so for example, like if you delete some snapshots that this one depends on, but it keeps those blocks, the amount of unique data for this snapshot will grow.
Okay, got it. So it's a very dynamic from that way, I think. Okay.
Basically,
and I think this, yeah, I think this was going to be stored in this new volume backup CR, if I'm understanding you correct, Vita. That you're going to add a field to this, is that correct?
Yeah, it can, and thought of where it should come. First, my question is about like how the Restic, the snapshots differences sizes will come to know.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah. So both are not related right now.
I would put that one off because that's actually a really, it seems simple, but it's a really ugly topic. And we've got other things happening under the covers as well. Like for example, in the vSphere plugin, we currently have a local snapshot and a remote snapshot. So we take a local snapshot, then we copy it off to S3. Right now, we delete the local snapshot immediately, but we thought about having policies where we could retain those for a while. And depending on what point in time you're at, there may be a local snapshot plus remote snapshot that you could reclaim. It's spaced in different places. So it's tricky.
I also just copied, I have not read this in depth, but Rustic has a document on their repository and data format that you could take a look at. Yeah. They have commands, and there's like Rustic prune, and there's commands that can do maintenance on the repository. And I think that alters the math that's done as well. It helps clean up some of these things. And I think that would alter what some of these differential numbers you would get. Yeah. So I don't think I have a clear answer for you right now. And honestly, I have not looked at this closely, so I don't think I can give you a good answer here. Looks like they also have a...
Sure.
The other question that I would have, question/concern I would have is, what happens when you're trying to either delete or dedupe from Rustic while somebody requests a restore? Like, what happens then? If we have multiple entities acting on the same Rustic repository at the same time, that might lead to undesirable behavior.
Just to jump in on that, we do have some lock management. So Rustic repositories have the concept of locks, exclusive and non-exclusive locks, depending on the operation. So when we're doing a Rustic prune, which is actually deleting blocks of data from the repository, there's an exclusive lock on the repository, which means no other Rustic operations can go on. So Velero should be respecting that, but it's definitely something to keep in mind.
I think even if you went and got the key and you operated directly on it, that lock would be put in place too, right? Is that right, Steve?
Yeah, the Rustic CLI, the Rustic binary writes a lock file into the repository. So there's a file in the S3 bucket that essentially says this repo is locked exclusively, and so no other operations will take effect. Velero just kind of gracefully handles it, meaning it's aware that the lock exists and it doesn't try to run operations so that it doesn't get errors.
Yeah. And Vita, so to understand the problem you're trying to solve, are you mostly just trying to communicate, are you just trying to surface what Rustic did in a given backup?
Yeah, I'm trying to understand, like, so basically if I delete a particular backup, I mean, what is a particular snapshot or backup is consuming space at the object location at the given point of time. But I understand that it's very dynamic based on the amount of data coming in and deleting of other snapshots depends on that. So the idea is, like, for user, I have a lot of snapshots, and what is the storage capacity used at my object location for it? So that's my question.
So would you not be able to track the growth of footprint in your object store location itself? Wouldn't that give you the answer directly instead of trying to aggregate all the various components that contribute to it?
No, no. Actually, it gives you the overall aggregated value, like for all the snapshots goes to a single repo. So it's I have 10 backups. Now, what is my object location? I know, but what each particular backup is consuming for itself, that is not known. Okay. Yeah, I think I'll also explore more. I think I got the required info, some learnings on it. Yeah, the next one is the PR. I incorporated Steve's comments, and yeah, it's open for the review. I removed the volume snapshot the need from the code, the design wise. So it now only have the volume plugin backups here. and the volume.snapshot is not there. I remove the aliases. Yeah, you can have a look at it offline, and yeah, I incorporate the review comments.
Okay, cool. I will take another look.
Security part also saying that changes and the impact it can do. I mean, we running the Velero namespace, Velero service account.
Yep, cool. All right, anything else on this topic?
Nothing, Nolan, thanks.
All right, and then Tony with the update to Jekyll 4.1.0.
Yeah, so Duffie talked about it already. So it's just to say that I think it's done, but I don't know the website that well. And I was hoping to get somebody to review it and make sure there's no changes, because technically it should be like exactly the same. And I didn't see any difference between like the online version and the testing version, let's say. But I don't know the whole website yet. So I was hoping to get somebody to review that. And next step would be to focus on trying to migrate Jekyll to Hugo, which seems to be slightly more difficult.
Sure, yeah, we will definitely take a look at this. And yeah, I think
on the Jekyll update, I'm not sure how to review. I've looked at the website, I've like clicked through a couple of links and everything looks the same. So I'm not sure where, if things are not working correctly, where would they surface?
Yeah, if it's working, my gut check would be to like try it locally with the make serve docs, I think. And then if our previews are looking good, merge it. Like I think
Yeah.
if it looks good and it runs locally, I'm cool with just going with it.
Okay.
That's my 2 cents.
Yeah.
I'm not a Jekyll expert
good.
either.
Yeah. The preview looks good. I'm going to try and run it locally, and let's get this merged.
Cool. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? And yeah, the change to Hugo would be bigger, definitely. And the good news there would be, I know our make serve docs target takes a while because it has to go every time. We don't build that Docker image such that we cache all of the dependencies. So it takes a little bit to get started because it downloads every time. But with Hugo, we could just cache the binary and be done there, at least from that perspective. So, but changing all the stuff would be a different format. And I know we carry some Heptio custom website legacy there that's not really pretty. So that will be more involved. But thank you for getting that updated, and we'll definitely take a look at this soon, because this one should be fairly easy to close out. And then in contributor shoutouts, I took a look through the repos. Unfortunately, we've been slow to get PRs reviewed. We've got a lot of big things going on that the team has been working on. So apologize that we have been slow to get reviews done. Thank you to Vita and Mark Campbell. And I'm going to pronounce your name wrong. I'm sorry, Fong, for putting in design documents on especially so for we've got, let's see here. We've got design documents for restore hooks, progress on the volume snapshotters, and this new one on the specific order within a given type, which we need to take a look at. So thank you for getting those in. And hopefully this week we can get back to getting our PRs merged a little bit at a little bit quicker pace. So unless there's anything else, give people just a second to unmute if they have anything.
Hi, this is Tushar from India, and I just had some questions about Velero. So, I mean, am I audible?
Yep.
Okay, so I have a bare metal Kubernetes cluster. So this might be very basic. I'm sorry I missed the most of the part in the meeting because of my office timing. So the thing, what I was trying to do today is, I have a bare metal cluster and I just made a Ubuntu pod, and I attached a persistent volume to it, and I kind of mounted the root directory in the PV. So today what I tried to do is I took a backup of the same pod of the entire namespace using Velero, and I stored it in my Minayo bucket. So when I deleted the namespace, and when I tried to restore the thing, I got my pod back, I got the PV back, but the data inside the PV was not present. I'm using Roc Ceph 1.3 as my dynamic storage provisioner for my Kubernetes cluster. So is there anything that I have missed in the Velero installation steps because of which the data inside the PVC is not backed up, or is it not a feature of Velero yet? I mean, I'm just trying to evaluate as much as I can. So that's my question, because I really have this use case in my company that we need to store the data inside the pods.
So it sounds like my guess is that there is no, to my knowledge, there is no Roc Ceph plugin for managing snapshots on Roc and Ceph. So you may want to try installing with Restic to grab that local data. Velero relies on plugins to grab data out of the persistent volumes. Otherwise, it relies on Restic to take file system level snapshots.
Actually, I used use -restic while installation. While
Did you
installing
tag
Velero.
the volumes? Because the volumes need to be, the pods need to be tagged also, correct?
I just, I mean, I'm sorry if I might have mistaken over here, but I just did Velero backup create, include backup name, include namespaces and my namespace. That's it what I did. I mean, have I
So
missed it?
for Restic, you need to tag the volumes on the pods as being backed up with Restic. There's somewhere in the docs for that, is there?
Yeah, it's in the
Yeah.
So I'm gonna
there's a document on using Restic, and there's actually we're going to be adding this in Velero 1.5 that we can default to including everything with Restic, but for now, on the pod, you have to, I forget the label off the top of my head, but you have to say backup. Thank you, Steve. In the chat, Steve linked to the Restic documentation.
Thank you so much, Steve, for that. Yeah.
Yeah, there's an
So
annotation that you have to add to the pod.
So if I do this, my data inside the PVs will get backed up, because I really have a huge production cluster, which we need to, for which we need to set up some backup policies. So I am relying on Velero a lot. So I'll surely try that, and I'll obviously put it in the Slack channel as I face any difficulties while doing that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Just one quick thing, just with Roc Ceph, you also might be able to use the CSI snapshots because that's a CSI plugin. I haven't done that myself with Roc Ceph, but I'm thinking that ought to be an option there as well.
Oh, is it? I didn't
Actually,
realize they had CSI.
I tried the snapshot feature by Ceph, but I contacted their developers on Slack too. But they were saying that the project is still in V1 Alpha 1 phase, and the complete implementation is different from V1 Beta 1 on which they are working right now. So they suggested me to wait, and the evaluation won't be of much use as of now. So they are planning to stabilize it in the next release. So I'm just waiting for that. But for the backup thing, I really trust on Velero, and I want to achieve the data inside the PVC backup thing. So yeah.
Ceph is still using the V1 Alpha 1 snapshot APIs. They have not
Exactly.
migrated to V1.
Okay, they're not on the beta ones. Okay,
No.
got it. All right.
And just for this thing, what I'm doing is I'm just running a Minayo Docker container on my NFS. So do I need to, I just saw this setting, a Velero snapshot location. So is there any, I'm not using GCP or anything. It's just pure bare metal. So do I need to configure any default snapshot location or anything like that? I just got confused between, there was one doc and it said that I had to do, create a snapshot location named like EU, something I can't recollect it right now. So is there any doc around that? If it's not too much, can you, add that thing in the, evaluate Velero with Minayo doc that you already have, that you can create a default snapshot location thing?
I would say PRs are welcome. If you have docs improvements that you want to suggest, please feel free to open a PR on our repo. If you need information on how to do that, we can help you with that.
Yeah, that's what exactly. It would be great if you would help me with that. Yeah, that's it from my side. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for the questions, and thanks everyone for attending, and we'll see you all next week. Have a great week, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.